Detective Jack Sullivan was once a respected police officer, but now he sits on death row awaiting execution for a crime he didn't commit. The evidence against him is terrifyingly perfect, and the justice system has turned its back on him. But Rex refuses to give up. K9, Jack's faithful German shepherd, senses something is wrong but won't leave or accept that Jack is guilty. While the world continues on, Rex takes action to unearth a deadly secret, but will it be revealed in time to save Jack? The courtroom was crowded. The air was heavy with anxiety. Chilly fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows over Jack Sullivan's anxious face. He sat tight in the defendant's chair, his knuckles going white as he held the armrest. As the jury reached, the judge broke the jury's quiet. "We have your honor," he said, clearing his throat. In the case of the state of Arizona versus Jack Sullivan on the charge of first-degree murder, we find the prisoner guilty. Jack's chest clenched at the words. Not right. This couldn't be occurring around him. The prisoner is condemned to death by lethal injection. Some gasped. Others exchanged knowing glances. The walls appeared to close in the air thick with finality. Jack felt numb. A verdict had erased his life. Jack said nothing, although his mind was racing. He knew he was innocent but had airtight gunpowder residue on his hands. Shaky footage of him entering the victim's flat. A witness said they spotted him that night in a great setting. He looked around the courtroom in the back row as the BFFs locked Jack's wrists in cold steel cuffs. Outside the courthouse, Rex waited with a temporary handler, but as the heavy doors opened, the German shepherd's stiff ears sprang forward while Sarah Blake sat still. Rex saw Jack. But something was wrong. His partner was in chains, and the K9 lunged forward barking wildly, straining against the leash so hard that the handler stumbled forward. The officer struggled to hold him back, but Rex wouldn't calm down. Jack was shoved into the prisoner transport van. Rex let out a last snarl, staring at his companion. He wouldn't give up in her little flat. Sarah Blake reclined against her desk, eyes fixed on her laptop screen. She had spent the evening working through Jack Sullivan's case files, looking for anything that didn't make up. The evidence was flawless, but Sarah had been a detective long enough to know that no case was perfect. Then a scratching sound at her door. Sarah unlocked the door and Rex jumped inside. The K9 went to the window and back to her, howling, his brown eyes restless and urgent. Sarah scowled. "Are you trying to tell me anything?" Rex never acted like way unless something was wrong. After barking, Rex went to the door with his tail wagging wildly, pushing her to follow her intuition. She grabbed her coat, rifle, and vehicle keys. Under faint streetlights, Rex led the way. Sarah anticipated Rex to take her to the police station, but he brought her to the docks, where rusty cargo containers and abandoned warehouses loomed in the misty night. Sarah grimaced, but before she could think, Rex ran towards a portion of the pier, his nose pressed into the soil, releasing a low whine and digging. Sarah kneeled beside him and took up a charred piece of cloth, caressing it between her fingers. Her pulse raced when she saw part of a police uniform buried near the murder scene where journalist David Monroe had been slain. She took a photo and placed the fabric in an evidence bag. "You just found something major." Rex back at her flat. Sarah stared down. As Sarah spread the paperwork on her desk, she remembered what Jack told her before his imprisonment. Jack was examining David Monroe, a writer probing police corruption. She picked up past stories and scanned Monroe's work. Victor Reynolds, deputy chief of police, stood out. Monroe was assassinated before he could disclose a vast corruption network, and Jack, the cop investigating his death, was framed. Sarah got a chill that Reynolds may be behind everything before she could absorb it. Her phone buzzed an unexpected number. She hesitated, then answered. "Getaway Blake, or the dog dies first." The cue went dead. Sarah held the phone, furious, knowing she was digging and would do everything to stop her. The massive steel door slammed behind her. The air smelt of wet concrete, metal, and somber misery as Jack Sullivan echoed through death row's frigid halls. Jack sat on his tiny mattress looking at the ceiling, repeating his lawyer's last words. "Jack, There's nothing more we can do. The appeal was denied, so this is how it ended. He refused to die for a crime he didn't commit. A quiet knock against the bars made Jack turn Sullivan. Ryan Torres, a prison guard he once trusted, didn't look like an officer upholding justice. You need to get out of here tonight. Jack breathed slowly. Therefore the perpetrators wanted him silent. Please assist. Torres looked about before sliding a tiny key through the bars. The morning revealed an old maintenance tunnel, but you must go swiftly before the next shift change. Jack didn't hesitate. He wouldn't die here. Sirens pierced the night. Jack ran, love lungs, burning heart pounding against his ribs. Every step felt like a battle behind him. Sharp barks of K9 units pierced the air. They had a scent. They were closing in. Jack forced himself forward, pushing through the pain the side gate just ahead. But then floodlights exploded to life outside the prison in darkness. Jack ran along the chain-link fence, his lungs burning, the sharp barks of K9 units filling the air. They had picked up his scent. He ran towards the side gate Torres had promised to leave open. But just as he reached it, floodlights came on, a black SUV pulled out from the shadows, the doors flew open, and two men in dark clothing appeared. The cool barrel of a revolver pushed against his temple. Sullivan smirked. They had been waiting for him before he could respond. A forceful knock to the head dropped him into darkness. Noah Carter, her trusty tech specialist, worked on the city's surveillance system as Sarah Blake sat in her car eyeing her laptop. I found it, Noah whispered urgently as the black SUV that carried Jack headed off into the South Industrial Zone. Sarah held the wheel. Can you follow it? Noah stopped and said, I got a hit from a petrol station near the turn. They drove into an abandoned warehouse district. Traffic cameras are scarce there. Sarah glanced at Rex in the passenger seat, who had been silent all night. When she put up the map, Rex perked up, ears forward, gaze on the screen. Sarah, you agree, buddy? Rex barked sharply. Sarah shifted into drive and rushed towards the warehouse. Jack Sullivan sat with steel wires in his wrists, chained to a chair. Did you believe you could escape? Sullivan Reynolds sipping whiskey. Slowly Jack smiled despite the bleeding on his lip. Can't hide forever, Reynolds. Reynolds laughed at the police who ignore you under my method. Jack glanced at Rex as a fierce bark reverberated outside. Reynolds tensed, signaling his troops to check. Too late, the warehouse doors exploded. Sarah Blake came in with a gun, demanding cops down their weapons. Rex shot a missile at Reynolds' man. Rex assaulted the guy, smashing his forearm before he could respond. Jack seized his moment, summoning his last reserves of strength. He threw his weight forward, toppling the chair and loosening the cables around his legs. Reynolds grabbed his rifle, but Rex pounced at him. The K9 hooked onto Reynolds' shooting arm, tugging furiously, causing him drop the weapon. Jack launched a fist into Reynolds' face. The two men smashed down the floor, struggling. Reynolds, older but powerful, rolled on top of Jack, trying to pin him down, but Rex wasn't done. Once more, the K9 bit Reynolds' shoulder and pulled him off Jack. Jack lifted himself up and threw a powerful punch to Reynolds' jaw, collapsing him. Sarah ran forward to cuff him. You're arrested for murder, obstruction, and corruption, Victor Reynolds. Jack kneeled by Rex, holding his head. Good work, buddy. Rex wagged his tail but maintained his eyes on Reynolds to make sure he never ran again. The wail of sirens boomed through the night as Victor Reynolds was forced into a police car with his hands. His steel-bound face was pallid, his swagger gone. No power, no allies, just dread. Jack Sullivan stood beside Sarah Blake, watching the guy who nearly wrecked his life. But this time he was at ease, knowing justice had prevailed. Sarah smiled and put out a little recording device, pressing play to hear yourself. Jack Sullivan took the fall from me. Ralph's voice sealed his destiny. An officer arrived. We've got enough proof. He's not getting out of this. Jack took a long breath. It was finished. He knelt beside Rex, running his fingers through the K9s. For you saved my friend. Rex wags his tail, his eyes full of understanding. Jack appeared in court 2 weeks later as a free man. The judge said that this court overturned Jack Sullivan's conviction and freed him for a while. Unable to move. Jack, was this real? His fingers clenched at his sides after everything. Chains, betrayals, nightmares. He was free. Sarah grabbed his shoulder. Jack inhaled forcefully, whispering. Applause rose as I couldn't recall freedom. Sarah grinned as Rex barked triumphantly. Jack left the courtroom, seeing Rex's "Let's go home, buddy" at a special ceremony in front of police headquarters a week later. Jack wasn't honored. Commander Rex stood proudly at the platform to honor K9. Rex for his bravery and dedication in executing justice. A medal hung around Rex's neck. Jack kneeled alongside his mate, ruffling his fur. "You deserve this." Tail-wagging Rex standing tall with pride, the crowd cheered. But Jack realized the police department was no longer his home. One badge belonged to Sarah and the other to Jack, the police chief. Sarah nodded. "I can't serve a system that deceived its people." Jack paused before laying his badge alongside hers. "Exhaled. What's next for you two? We have some ideas." Sarah grinned at Jack and Rex, who was eagerly waiting at their feet. Jack crossed his arms and kept his eyes steady. Justice was still there, not cops. Their battle as the sun set painted the sky orange and gold. No more prison walls, no more cold dead cells. Here was freedom beside Jack Sullivan as he dug into the warm sand listening to the waves. Taking a deep breath, Rex closed his eyes and sprawled out, savoring the rare moment of peace. Jack leaned over and stroked his loyal companion's thick fur. Soft footsteps came from behind. Sarah Blake joined him with 2 beers and handed one to Jack before settling down next to him. Her gaze was fixed on the endless ocean. "So have you thought about what's next?" Her voice was but there was a genuine curiosity in her tone. Jack cracked open the beer and took a slow sip before smiling. Sarah nodded, slightly smirking. "Sounds like something I'd join up for." They sat in peace, letting the sea breeze wash away the weight of everything they had experienced. Jack looked down at his mate, his fingers rubbing softly behind the dog's ears. "What do you say, buddy? One more mission?" Rex's tail wagged harder and he barks resolutely, answering clearly. Sarah laughed. "Yes, we have a team." Jack didn't respond, just smiled and inhaled the salty air. It had been years since he had felt this light. He had lost everything: honor, freedom, and faith in the justice system. But now he had taken it back on his own terms. If you've made it this far, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Jack, Sarah, and Rex's journey. Leave a comment below. I read every single one. If you like thrilling emotional stories like this, don't forget to